Hello, TradingView community. Welcome to my new analysis about Meta. And within my analysis, I have spotted some really important determinations going on with Meta. Within my data dashboard, I have spotted some really important underlying dynamics that should not be underestimated in any cases. And Meta is such a dumped stock within the market. It has increased with huge bearish pressures within all of these recent times. And this is such a major development that is primarily representative for the whole meta chart here, especially as meta has shown up with this huge bearish dump to the downside. This was such a huge dump to the downside from where meta has engraved many huge long positions and liquidated many long positions to the downside, dumping over 70% to the downside, showing up with these huge bearish downside liquidations and showing up with these huge bearish pressures to the downside. And this huge downside pressure has liquidated over 800 billion positions within the whole market. And this was such a huge bearish pressure determination. This is why Meta is still in the more bearish interface right now, and there are still bearish alignments going on here, bearish indications, bearish perspective that I have spotted within my analysis that should not be underestimated. And therefore, this whole relief rally that Meta has shown up with here is currently rather a highly weak relief rally in any cases. This whole relief rally is highly weak because what is so weak within this relief rally is that the volume is declining more and more. This volume is reaching such a low point within this whole uptrend that this is a highly weak rally here within the market. And this weak rally is rather constructed than anything else. This means that within this whole weak market rally, Meta is ripe for a major pullback to the downside once the whole market condition turns to the downside, especially as Meta is building here this ascending trend line within this whole structure. And this ascending trend line is ascending such a important ascending trend line because once it has been broken to the downside, this will actually evaluate the whole price action into a conversion of bullish price action and of bearish price action and bearish momentum to the downside, especially as this whole trend is currently highly weak and it gets more weak day by day by day. Also, when looking at this whole dynamic here, it has to be mentioned that the meta stock is still heavily picked with major allegations of privacy breaches, customer data trading, and poor engineering conditions. This means that there's a increasingly unattractive structure, a increasingly unattractive stock structure for investors to actually move into Meta. And this is why there are also major underlying conditions that put Meta on the bearish short side possibility perspective and increase the bearish sentiment within Meta, especially from the investor perspective. This is also a major factor to consider here. Furthermore, Meta is building a much bigger formation. As I already mentioned it within previous analysis ideas, Meta is building such a big formation that is actually the major impediment of this whole formational structure. That is actually this major formational structure here. That is actually the underlying determination of this whole formational structure. And this formational structure is actually this huge descending channel formation. And within this huge descending channel formation, Meta already has major resistance clusters within this upper boundary determination from where it already pulled it back several times bearishly to the downside. And now Meta is approaching this upper boundary resistance once again. And this means that the possibility for a bearish breakdown to the downside increases to enormously high possibilities. Over 1000% is the possibility for a breakdown to the downside from this level on. And therefore, this is a high possibility breakdown scenario, especially as Meta approaches these upper supply resistance zones. And it has to be mentioned that within this upper supply resistance zone, there is a 800 position long liquidation spike actually waiting to move to the downside. And therefore, it has to be mentioned that Meta also within this whole structure is forming this gigantic ascending wedge formation. And such a ascending wedge formation is marking the reversal to the downside into the bearish directions almost in almost all cases once it has been completed. Therefore, this will be a hugely determining factor, especially once Meta breaks down below this lower boundary of this whole ascending wedge formation. This will mark the whole reversal determination and the spikes to the downside with this huge bearish dumping to show up again, as it Meta already did within the previous determinations, especially as Meta already completed such a ascending triangle formation once in the past. This is likely to happen again. And in this case, Meta will show up with the next spike to the downside with this huge bearish leg to the downside. And in this case, the position liquidations can be even much more as the allegations against Meta are not increasing. There are privacy breaches, there are poor engineering conditions, there are also customer data trading allegations against Meta, and all these factors put also bearish pressure on Meta from the investor perspective side. And in this case, it is more likely that investors are going to take profits here and move out of the market. And when this happens, this ascending wedge formation is likely to be completed with a bearish breakdown to the downside, especially as the volume decreases more and more and more and more. And therefore, these are the major determinations to watch out here, especially once the breakdown happens below this lower boundary. This will actually be the setup from where Meta is going to continue further with further liquidations in this whole structure taking place, with huge liquidations actually showing up within this whole structure and liquidating all the long positions here till the final supports have been reached. And in this case, the final supports are within this lower boundary. However, this does not mean that Meta will reverse within this whole structure for sure, because if the long liquidations reach such a bearish momentum that from there on Meta has not any possibilities to reverse, it is also likely to indicate a further bearish momentum into these lower directions, especially if Meta should break down below this lower boundary. This is actually indicating a much larger bearish wave to the downside. And in this case, Meta also will have completed this gigantic double top structure, especially once Meta has broken down below the lower boundary. This is going to elevate this was bearish condition to a much larger level, and it is actually going to complete this gigantic double top formation with the first top forming here and the second top will be completed once the breakdown below the lower boundary has been completed. This will actually increase the bearish pressure, and this means that Meta will not have any possibilities to reverse here within this whole structure. Therefore, these are the major determinations going on with the current Meta price action and technical perspectives, as well as the underlying perspectives that I have spotted within my data dashboard and within my analysis and within my underlying determinations of the price action, as well as the important investor perspective formational fundamental structures to consider here. With this being said, it will be great when you support my project further with a like, follow, and comment. Bye bye.